Our first topic this week is a hot one. I'm joined at the table by Merritt Allen. She's Executive Director for Vox Optima. Eric Riego, former New Mexico Senator and doctoral fellow at the New Mexico Center for Health Policy. Tom Garrity is back with us. He's with the Garrity Group. And Martha Burke, an author and political psychologist who specializes in women's issues. Welcome to all of you. Now, Governor Susana Martinez recently announced a shakeup in her cabinet. She appointed Tourism Secretary Monique Jacobson to head the Children, Youth, and Families Department. Now, COAFD is facing a lot of questions about how the state is addressing child safety. And Eric, I got to ask you first. You're a former executive director for New Mexico Voices for Children. Simple, off the top question. In your heart, do you feel like this was the best candidate for this job, and was the search wide enough? If yes, why? And if no, why not?
No. First of all, Monique's very competent at what she does. She's got a great marketing background. I think she's done a great job over at tourism. If we were talking about her being in charge of the state police, for example, I think law enforcement would be very, very concerned. Not because she's not a competent person in her field, but because this is a very important agency. Foster children, early childhood, child abuse, these are serious issues. And I just can't believe that there wasn't someone with a psychology or a social work or some kind of background somewhere in the ranks of Republican supporters or just the general public who could have done this job. So I think she's doing a great job where she is. I wish she would have stayed, but I do think this is, you know, and the bigger problem, Gene, is just that I think that this goes to what the governor, unfortunately, of how they view government, which is, you know, you have to think about government putting professionals who know the field in those places, and anybody can't do any job. And I think this is some of the criticism she's received around Hannah Scandera, never being in the classroom, never really been in that kind of position before. Whether or not they're competent people, there is something to be said for knowing the field and having a long track record in that field.
Right. Well, on that point, Martha Burke, good to see you, by the way. Happy New Year.
Thank you.
On Eric's last point there, if I'm in the field, so to speak, and I feel like I'm being judged by my new boss, who has never been in the field, basically, is that something that she can get across? Do you know what I mean? I feel a little anxious about that.
It's going to be an uphill pull.
Yeah.
I am a psychologist by training, actually, and I had a practice many years dealing with these kinds of issues in the schools and in the public health system. So I can tell you that the confidence of staff is extremely important to making the wheels turn correctly. Now, having said that, CYFD has a lot of problems. It does need stronger management. Is this the right management? I'm with Eric. I sort of doubt it. It smells like a sister-in-law deal to me.
Tom, good to see you. Happy New Year as well. That's a good line there, I know, right? But there was something to be said for management competence. Getting the trains to run on time, getting the money to work better, more efficiency. There's something to be said for that, isn't there?
Yeah, well, management and competence are two words that have not been used with CYFD in quite a while.
Excellent point.
And so having someone with Monique's capabilities, I think is really good. And yes, I don't disagree. I think she has an uphill battle as far as winning the trust of her troops.
How important is that in your mind?
Oh, it's extremely important because you have, and I'm just going to make a rash generalization here, you have state employees who have been there 10, 15, 20 years, and they're going to get into a mindset that if they don't like somebody, they're going to hunker down. They're just going to wait 4 years. And as a result, government tends to cease, with great effectiveness, which is a whole other debate.
Sure.
But when you look at it's the precedent setting of this. We had talked a little bit about Heather Wilson ahead of time and CYFD, but there's a whole other area, and that is John Garcia. John Garcia was started out as Secretary of Tourism in the Johnson administration and was seen as the governor's go-to person. He oversaw the state fair, the only time the state fair had actually turned a profit. Now, he wasn't a carny. He didn't show any pigs or cows, but he did a great job in managing the state fair, and then he moved over to economic development. So, I think Monique Jacobson is really just the governor's go-to person. As just a regular resident, I was really shocked to hear about the news.
Right.
But it was like, okay, well, let's see if this works.
Yeah, absolutely. Merritt, Happy New Year to you. Love that tie. It's rocking. Love it. The idea, let me kind of paint a picture here. I have to imagine that this woman's going to have to stand in front of this entire situation, staff and everything, and lay out a vision for the future of how she sees this department going. At that point, is it a problem that she's not been in social services and child welfare before on the vision stuff? Or is it just, she does the management of keeping the trains running and the people just below her actually do that kind of thing? What do you think about that?
Well, I think her challenge, as has been espoused by my fellow panelists, is she has to connect with that staff. She has to make them part of the vision. She has to understand what their work is. And in this appointment, I think she may have been the most qualified person who said yes. This job is hard. This job is hard, and the media are all over this. I mean, look at what happened. I think we took one of the most qualified law enforcement people in the state, Gordon Eden. He's now APS chief. He inherited, APD, CYFD. He inherited that, and he hadn't been in the job for a month before he was taking that fire.
That's right.
So I think the fact that Monique has made such a success out of tourism, and she's willing to do this, I appreciate her willingness to serve the public, because this is not going to be a fun or easy job. There are going to be winners and losers. There are going to be people she does not make happy. But I think if she understands that all of the social services and experts, social workers and experts and psychiatrists need to be listened to and need to be part of the vision, I think she can be successful.
Gene, I just got to say that this is not tourism. You make a mistake and you don't book a conference or tourism. Maybe you lose a Tesla deal. This is about kids like Amory who will die if you don't have the proper response. This is serious business. This is not about, gee, did we land a contract or a company? This is about with all due respect, it's a big difference between a state fair and hogs and children who are in very precarious situations. So, and I know Tom Tom wasn't making that connection, but my point is, this is other agencies, if they just send over economic development, give it a shot. Cultural affairs even, maybe. But this is probably the most important agency in terms of what state government needs to do. If we can't agree that protecting the state's children is the most important job, it's also what the governor said she's committed to.
Well, and part of what the governor or the secretary designate is going to have to be able to do is surround herself with the experts. So the rank and file of children, youth, and families who can be those liaisons, who can carry the messages, people who know how the system is supposed to work, and hopefully have been very good practitioners at that. So that's really going to be her key to success, because it's really going to be management, it's going to be leadership, but she needs that first tier of defense in the form of folks who have been there, done that.
But to Merritt's point about she may have been the only person that said yes, or the best person that said yes, we don't know, because neither Jacobson or the governor will talk about the search process. How did this decision come about? All they'll say is they had a few conversations.
Well, and I don't think that's necessarily, that's a pot shot to say, a bit of a pot shot for me to have said that Jacobson may have been the most qualified person to say yes. But at the same time, what good would it do to say that? Why would the governor or Jacobson say that?
That's not what
that
I
would
mean.
not help her.
I just mean if they did do a search, they could say we did an exhaustive search and we felt she was the best candidate for the job. They haven't said that.
Let me ask you this, Martha. One of the skill sets, it seems to me in a position like this with a department like this, it gets to Eric's point about Omari in that whole situation. Is she the personality to stand up in front of a camera at a news conference and explain why a child died on her watch through something that was neglectful or for whatever reason? Do you see what I mean? It's a lot different face you have to put on to deal with these kind of things.
It is a lot different because tourism is mostly about sales. And CYFD is mostly about tragedy, let's face it, when we're talking to the media. You don't hear the successes. The media doesn't come around unless there is a tragedy. I think, again, it's going to be a challenge for her. I don't know her personally. Perhaps she can pick that skill up, but without some kind of depth of background into what the pathology here is, what these issues are about, it's going to be hard.
Eric, let's finish up with the last minute we have here about what her skill sets are that people talk about, and that is being able to get money out of the legislature. She clearly can make a compelling case to people that we need more money, and she's looking for $10 million more for CYFD. I got to think this legislature wants to give her a fighting chance, it would seem to me. Do you feel good about the money she's asking for?
Well, I think it's great that they're even talking about those numbers. I mean, I still think that that's nowhere near what the numbers we need in terms of staffing and social workers. Early childhood is deeply underinvested in, and if she's good at it, good on her. I hope so. I would think that with a Republican governor, Republican House, a very narrow margin in the Senate, that this governor should be able to fund what she thinks is important. If she's willing to, if part of the case is that she's going to be able to get more resources for CFYFD for enforcement, for early childhood, for the foster care system and so on, great. But I can't believe that somebody who also had a substantive background, good management skills, good leadership skills. I mean, Monique's wonderful. I think she's gonna be fine with the media. She's great with the media. She's very personable. It's got to be much deeper than that. Do you understand the social problems facing the state, one of the poorest states in the country with some of the biggest social challenges in the state? There's probably not a department, as I said, that has a tougher job than this one. Why not get a doc who's been in the field? Why not get, you know, there are folks at LFC who've been doing this work, who are legislative finance committee staffers, very smart folks. Bring one of them up. They've been doing this work.
Are you talking about instinct? Is it important to have instinct in this kind of a job, or is it just
I think you've got to understand the social problems, and you've got to understand the research. You've got to understand what works with kids and what the social problems are for kids. And I just got to say, I really am. I was a huge supporter of Monique's when she ran. I worked with her mother on city council. I think the world of her. I just think they're really setting her up for failure.
Interesting. We'll be back in a minute with a closer look at what's being done to reach out to New Mexicans who have not signed up for health insurance coverage.